Welcome to the History Slam podcast from ActiveHistory.ca. Here's your host, Sean Graham.
Thank you, Adam. Welcome to History Slam, everybody. I am Sean Graham, coming at you today nearly live. We are in Beijing, China. We've done this show on the east coast of Canada, on the west coast of Canada, in the south of the United States, and the northeast. And we decided we would blow the budget for the whole year and come to Beijing just to record a single episode. We are in the Beijing airport in the Air China Lounge. We've been here for an hour, and we still have like 3.5 hours to go before the plane is even supposed to land or something. We're here forever. It's a marathon day. But I'm here with Dorothy Verkerk from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and we have just finished 10 weeks in China teaching at the University of International Business and Economics. So, Dorothy, welcome to the show.
Oh, I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
So, the reason we're in the lounge, we should say that one of us is going business class, and the other one is a little annoyed that the one going business class is not giving up the seat or not willing to share the seat. But I think it is a security issue. That's what I think that, when we investigated with Air Canada, it's a real security issue. You can't be changing seats. All right, but we're going to signify that we're done with there we go. All right. Very nice.
Yeah.
Very nice. Cheers.
Salute.
Cheers. We finished. Oh, that's good.
Yeah, nothing like a lukewarm beer, but you're in China.
Yeah. Not just with lukewarm, but lukewarm Chinese beer. I've been here, like, people have been saying to me, like, at the end of the day, you probably want to just get a beer to relax. I'm like, well, I've been in China for 10 weeks. I haven't really had a beer. It's a fine place, wonderful people. The beer here, I think, is very lacking.
Yeah, we all heard you grouching about this for 10 weeks. 10 long. Oh, God.
It was my number one issue. So, for anyone who doesn't know, because I don't think I've talked about this on the podcast before. I haven't really been active on Twitter since we've been here. I was contacted by the University of International and Business and Economics in October, November to come over.
Can we just call them UIBE now?
Sure. I was contacted by them in October and November asking if I would come over and teach in this international summer program that they have, where students who are Chinese nationals who study in the United States come to UIBE in the summer and can get transfer credits for the degrees in the United States. So I taught 5 sections in that program in a 4-week session, 5-week session. I also taught UIB students in a separate but related summer program where international faculty come over to teach the students on campus. So I've been in China since the end of May, flew on the 29th or something. We happen to be on the same flight.
Yeah, 28th.
Coming over.
Mm-hmm.
And
of course, you were in business.
Yeah, we didn't bump into each other on that flight, did we? We met the next day at the hotel.
Right.
So we've been here for just over 2.5 months almost, and you've done the same thing. You've been here the same amount of time.
Right. Yep.
We've taught the same number of classes, although all your classes were in the international program with students from the United States.
Right.
And but same number of classes. So I just thought it'd be fun as sort of an exit interview almost to talk about, because we've talked a lot about the pros, the cons, what's been good, what's been bad.
Right.
And I think we're in a bit of an agreement that for the most part it's been a really good experience.
Oh, I think it's been a great experience. This is the second time now I've taught in China. So I was a little bit more prepared about what I could expect. And in some ways we're kind of prepped by especially UIBE administration and even our own prejudices that it's going to be more difficult. We're going to have to dumb it down for Chinese students, or they're going to be these super brilliant. The 2 stereotypes about Asian students.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And for me, talking to one of our colleagues, Hung Tai, he said to me, "But Dorothy, it's summer school." And that was a revelation, of course it's summer school. It's summer school in Beijing. It's summer school in Chapel Hill. And you just have a whole different... it's just a whole different mentality. Everybody's in flip-flops.
Right, yeah.
And so immediately For example, when I was on the academic committee, so students would get into trouble academically, and then they would beg and plead and write the letter, please let me back in. And sometimes we would, but we'd always have a plan. And number one on our plan, can I diss a major? Well, two things on our plan. Switch your chemistry major to comm studies. And the second thing, no, really. And the second thing, take some summer school classes to get your GP up. I mean, so that's just what happens.
And for you, because as you said, you've done this before. You were in Guangzhou last time.
Right.
And for people who don't know, like I didn't know, Guangzhou, of course, is a small town in Chinese terms,
yeah,
right?
it's only like 13 million.
Tiny place.
Yeah, they do have flush toilets.
Okay, that's good.
And running water, which is good because they are formerly known as Canton.
Oh.
Where we get Cantonese food. So that orange sticky stuff that you got.
Yes. The red sauce, right? Yeah, the red. Yeah. So you did that in 2012?
2013.
So it's been 2 summers off, and now back to it. Did you notice any big differences between Guangzhou and Beijing in terms of the academic side of things?
Well, when I taught in Guangzhou, this was run by SIE, which is a private company, for profit. So very different, much smaller classes. Actually, they treated us pretty well there. And here, I think it's better for these students to be at UIBE in an academic setting. So I feel more confident about the credibility being in an affiliate. And UIBE is a really well-ranked school.
Yeah, really good school.
Yeah.
And we've all talked that some UIB students were in our international classes.
They're great.
As well. They're really good students. They're really good students. I mean, in the UIB class that I had that was exclusive to UIB, I mean, certainly language was a bit of an issue because some of them are studying, economics, in like Chinese economics, so English isn't a main focus for them in their daily lives, but in terms of the cognitive ability and the work,
they're super. Yeah,
like they've really produced some really good stuff.
Right.
And I was really impressed with not only that, but just even being on campus. It's a relatively small campus, and even though it's the middle of summer and it's 5,000 degrees here, and you feel like I always felt like I could almost swim to class. Well, it's so humid.
That's because you're Canadian.
It's true, yeah.
I just felt like...
you were just at home.
We were summering in Beijing because it was cooler and less humid than North Carolina. So, yes, we're summering in Beijing this year. Thank you.
Well, we did have a nice stretch of like 4 days where it was rainy and cool. We actually had classes canceled.
I think that's why they shut down the subways. Yeah. Sean, you were the only person who was happy about the weather.
It was pure ignorance. Once I figured out that like it was actually dangerous for people to be outside.
People were dying, but the Canadians happy.
I felt like I showed up to class that morning. I was like, guys, it's raining. Isn't this exciting? Like, this is great. It's cool. It's like, have you seen the footage of the subway yet? Like, no.
It's a waterfall.
My bad. But like even within that environment, there was a lot of activity on campus. There's people going on, like a lot going on, people out, and certainly it seems like the students are sort of always around and doing stuff, and it seems like a really sort of vibrant place. Within the geography of Beijing, it's a little removed from anything. It's sort of a residential area. There's not much directly around campus. But once you got on campus, it was
I thought it was pretty vibrant, and you would see a Caucasian walk down the sidewalk toward you, and I quickly learned you should not assume that their first language is English.
Yes.
It could be Russian, it could be German. You saw people from Africa.
Yep.
It was when they say international, I didn't realize how international this really was. So I was pretty impressed by that.
Yeah, that's the thing that I noticed as well. Like, because when you look at the faculty list of the first one that I saw, it was all American professors or professors who teach in the United States. I thought, well, that's not that international.
No.
And then you get here, and certainly the people who were teaching the UIB students, there was more people from other parts of the world than just the United States. But on campus, there's certainly a very strong international community. Now, we should say as well that you are an art historian.
Yes.
So you were teaching art history here.
Yes.
And now, apart from the technical challenges you had of trying to teach
It was terrible.
art history.
It was terrible.
The projectors, we shared a classroom, and the projectors would take colors and seemingly just assign them at random to
Well,
images.
I felt so bad because that beautiful painting by Titian of the Venus of Urbino, there she is, lying out there in all her nude glory, beautiful pearly skin. With those projectors, it's like she had a skin disease.
Yeah.
And it was like, let's not talk about color right now.
So that was an issue. And then for you, the internet here, you just Google internet in China and you
Don't forget it.
It's the internet here is what it is.
No, but they were putting fiber optics in my apartment as I was leaving.
So next year you're covered.
I was like, oh man, she's leaving quick. Stick it in.
Yeah, the person who's downloading these incredibly high quality images, get her out, then we'll put in the good internet.
I had to go back and actually put in light-colored images so the projectors could adjust. It was a mess, but anyway.
So apart from that, though, at least my experience, and I think yours was the same, in that most of the students who are here are math, science, engineering students who are getting their arts credits so they can focus on their majors when they go...
The really important.
The real stuff.
Right.
When they go back to school in the fall. And I'm just wondering what that experience was like for you in dealing with rooms that are pretty much exclusively non-art history people and people who are approaching this for the first time.
Right.
Because, even in a introductory class, you're going to have people who are at least interested in art history and are probably going to end up majoring in art history. And here you have people who, for the most part, are going to be one-offs.
Right. And it can be there's really two challenges, especially when you say sometimes in moments of self-doubt I say the history of art instead of art history, because art history sounds like I choose paintings to hang over your mother's sofa. Right? And the history of art has a little more cachet to it, but that's just something that you deal with. The hardest part, and I have this with American students too. They think it's going to be the easy course,
right?
And what they don't, and they're just going to sit around. They're just going to look at some pretty pictures and decide I like it, I don't like it. A child could do that kind of bullshit. But
that painting looks bad.
Yes.
A, please.
Yes. So you have to kind of overcome that, and a lot of them don't know that art history you have to deal with not only visual analysis, but you have to deal with history, politics, religion, a lot more than what they signed up for. Oh, and then I hit them with Italian and Greek terms. Oh, we had a really good time. Leonardo developed this technique where you can see it on the Mona Lisa. It's kind of a smoky effect, and it's called sfumato. And you could just see the Chinese students. They were like, what? By the end, though, they were all just spitting it out like they were cursing. Sfumato. It was really fun. So we had a good time. We had a good time with that. Hardest part for me, actually, was the dealing with Christianity.
Right.
That was really hard because you're dealing with students who are either Buddhist, Taoist, atheists, or a little bit of all of it.
Right.
So,
sorry not to interrupt, because at home too you have so much is based on Christian traditions. Like the calendar we use is based off a Christian calendar. So you don't have even if people in the United States aren't necessarily Christian, there's an awareness of it that you don't have here.
Yeah, and in America, at least you have people who have a basic idea of who Jesus was. I think some of my students, the only time they've heard Jesus was on campus when it was like, oh, Jesus Christ, God damn it, I mean,
yeah.
So, on one of my exams for quizzes, by the way, I had put up this Christ in Majesty with the 4 evangelist symbols, which are a man, an ox, an eagle, and a lion. And the answer that I got was the God and his pets. It was great.
That's good, yeah.
It was very good.
Yeah.
But it's taken me, what approach do I take?
Right.
How do I deal that? How do I deal that? Basically, I went with a storytelling So things like, I didn't say once upon a time, but I was kind of tempted because there's a bit of the mythology about it. But, the 14-year-old virgin, and she's told one day she's going to have this miracle baby, fully God and fully human. But I really would have loved to heard the dinner table conversation. Mom, Dad, I'm pregnant. Who's the guy? God.
Well, that checks out. All right, yeah. But it's interesting because that's one of those things that, like, it never even occurred to me. I honestly, I taught a global history survey, and I taught the Reformation, and 4 days later, you mentioned to me, like, I had to tell them exactly what Christianity was, and then I felt so stupid because I taught the Reformation under the assumption that everyone knew about Catholicism, and then it occurred to me, that's why nobody was understanding anything I was saying. I was getting all those blank stares, because I just assumed when I said Catholic Church, everyone knew what that meant.
Well, when I moved from Renaissance to Baroque art, so it's that span between counter Reformation, counter Reformation. So I spent, this is Protestant Reformation, protest, reform, and just listed it for them. I think that helped a little bit.
Right.
But what I thought was kind of cool about it is that a lot of students, I sort of polled them at the beginning of the first session. Why do you want to take this class? Well, obviously for credit, right? And it's going to be easy. And my mom likes art. But a lot of them said they wanted to know about Western culture. And, history and art history is a really good way to learn it.
Definitely, yeah. And it's, you do it in 4 weeks. And if nothing else, like now that you can go to a museum and kind of understand what it is, right? Like, if nothing else.
I'm glad you have such faith in my teaching and their memories.
I do, yes.
They will remember sfumato.
They'll remember that, yeah. And they'll also remember, so in the 5 week, I would come into the room after you were done, and you used the whiteboard a lot. And I would always see the terms and stuff. And I said this the other day, you'd drawn something on the board that when I was lecturing, I kept looking at it because, in the realm of, I know art history, like sort of general themes that tend to come up, sexuality being one of them.
Oh, yes.
That is revisited over and over.
That was a fun one to deal with.
This was an image that I kept looking at. It's like, you could look at this thing in a lot of different ways.
I think those were...
What happened in that room?
Those were cypress trees.
But that gets me to another issue that you had to deal with. I had to deal with a little bit as well in the American history class. We're talking about the sexual revolution in the 1960s, and like one of the songs I use is "Will You Still Love Me Tomorrow?" I think it's a really good representative song for the 60s, and I always play it and I say, "Does anyone know what this song is about? What do you think this song is about?" And at home, people tend to sort of just throw it out there because it's not that subtle of a song. Whereas here, nobody really wanted to outright say anything, and you could see they sort of knew what it was, but nobody actually wanted to say it. And there's sort of a bashfulness, I think, about sexuality. And given how much you had to deal with it, was that more of a challenge than you had anticipated?
Yeah, it was. And I found the best way to deal with it was just straight on. So we're looking at Michelangelo's David, and I'm assuming people can pull up an image of that, big chunk of beefcake, right? So
good-looking guy. He worked out.
Good-looking guy.
Yep.
Yeah,
he was in the gym.
And we talked about. They would always giggle and say, "Oh, he's naked or he doesn't have any clothes on." I said, "Well, in art history, let's just call him a nude." Right. But yeah, sometimes it was really uncomfortable because I wanted them to talk about the male gaze, the reclining female nude being sort of served up like fruit, and sometimes I just find sometimes it's easy because you can go for the laugh because you can get it,
right? And
you can certainly wake people up and pull them off from their cell phone. And I definitely think humor is a kind of pedagogical tool, but I don't know. I'm not sure if I ever really dealt with it well. One time I think I went too far.
Yes, you told us about that. And it's certainly, it will wake people up.
Yeah.
What you say. I think.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's interesting because, I mean, there's certain, like, anywhere you go in the world, there's going to be cultural differences from one place to the other. Hell, like, you teach in North Carolina. This year I taught in Boston. Like, those are two extraordinarily different places just on their own, like, within the same country. So, of course, when you go to the other side of the world, of course there's going to be cultural differences.
Right.
But the thing that I initially, my biggest struggle initially was the instruction that we got was teach us like you would teach it at home.
You can.
But you just can't do it.
No.
Particularly on an issue like that where you have to be more aware of the cultural norm here in order to effectively teach it.
Right.
Like, and that's something that I sort of learned on the fly. And I think the 5-week session, which was the second session, I was much more effective.
Yes.
Because I had a better feel for what their expectation was. So I think the struggle for me was, frankly, just ignorance. I don't mean that in like ignorance in a prejudiced way. Ignorance, and I just didn't know enough about Chinese culture before I got here to effectively communicate some ideas that maybe don't come up, or themes that don't come up certainly in Chinese popular culture.
Right. And I've been trying to keep a little bit of a running list of things I need to look up if I do this again.
Right.
But I happened to pick up, somebody left a textbook out called Chinese Religions, and I was reading it. It was just an intro survey text. And I just started realizing, there are different words I could use, different ways I could phrase things that my students would understand better. Let me just give you one little example. Saul's conversion on the road to Damascus. So he's going to go kill some Christians in Damascus. They actually really liked that story. They thought that was kind of cool. Blood killing. And I use the word conversion, and most people in America know what conversion is. It's you're born again. Mm-hmm. And none of my students knew what that was. But then I realized, I could have used the word enlightenment. And there are certain traditions where enlightenment is instantaneous happening, and so are there ways? But there's pitfalls there too, because maybe I'm not understanding. Maybe I'm using the word or misusing a concept I think is equal to conversion, but it's not. So all kinds of problems.
Yeah. Well, certainly for me, like I a similar example, like I teach in the global history, talk about the 7 Years' War a lot.
Yeah.
Because you kind of have to in a global history. And I mentioned in the 4-week session that in North America, some people refer to that as the French and Indian War.
Yeah.
And so on the final exam, a lot of people said, "Oh yeah, the 7 Years' War, that war between France and India."
Oh wow!
Right?
Wow!
Which it occurred to me like I didn't specify exactly what I meant. So when they heard Indian, they thought I was referring to India, the country.
Right.
So it was this really interesting thing for me to think about, and like that's a linguistic thing that like why and then it dawned on me like of course that makes sense. Why would they culturally associate the term Indian with anything other than India?
Right.
There would be no reason to, from what I gather, having been here in terms of the culture, that the term Indian would refer to people from India.
They were probably sitting there thinking, "Dang, they had to deal with it, Brits, and now they had to deal with it."
Geez,
and the
people in India, they really got hosed on that deal. If they were fighting the French, why weren't the Brits there? Why weren't they helping them? What's happening? Maybe so they're probably super confused as to what I was even talking about.
But it's kind of interesting too, because of course we would always say Native American, right? But somehow the French and Native American War just doesn't
roll off the tongue as well.
Doesn't work.
No. Or French Indigenous War, maybe.
Yeah,
that sounds a little better. But those are those little minor things that at home I've always taken for granted. Mm-hmm. That here I just couldn't. And it's similar if we were in Europe or Australia or South America, whatever. Maybe not South America, certainly cultural in terms of the word Indian might be different.
Right.
It showed me how narrow I was in terms of context.
Right.
In being able to assume so much back knowledge. And I knew coming in teaching the UIBE students in that class because I was teaching North American popular culture.
Mm-hmm.
I knew in that one I would have to provide a lot of background on stuff because
Right.
like students at home don't, when I talk about something like Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, they don't know who Jimmy Stewart is at home.
Isn't that sad?
It is. He was great.
I know.
He was so good.
I still can't watch certain movies at Christmas time.
No? Really? It's a Wonderful Life is just out?
I just because I know I'm going to cry the minute I think about that bell ringing. I'm sorry.
I showed the end of that in that class, but like students at home I know probably haven't seen Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. They probably don't know who Jimmy Stewart is, but I don't necessarily have to do 10 minutes on how the Great Depression to explain why Mr. Smith Goes to Washington is really a good Depression-era movie.
Right.
I could just say, Great Depression, here's how this reflects the Great Depression. Whereas here, one of my students, I did sort of I called it a postmortem, where I invited students from that class to come in and explain to me all the ways that I screwed up.
You were brave.
In the class, yeah. And one of the girls who came in...
There's a good tradition of that in communist China. You do know that,
right? So I came in and she basically said, like, especially with the Canadian stuff, they seem to have a greater awareness of the general tenets of American history, but in terms of Canada, they just had no idea. And what she said was, like, of course, like, why would we? Like, when we go to school, or I think she even framed it in this way. She said, when you went to school, did you learn Chinese national history?
No. Yeah,
and I said, no. And I said, well, then why would we know anything about Canadian national history? I said, that's a good point. And I thought, I had done enough to add context, but clearly I had not done enough. So it was this really interesting experience for me to go through and figure out exactly how much I am able to take for granted with students at home. And even the students in the United States, to a certain degree, when I taught the course this past year, they didn't know sort of a lot of the intricacies of Canadian history, but the general plot they could sort of follow along with. It was an interesting in that respect, but for you though, you're mostly dealing with European stuff.
Right.
Did your students have a lot of familiarity with the general tenets of Europe, or was it a similar idea?
Well, where I got really lucky was I had several students who really knew the Roman Empire.
Okay.
Like they had a lot of respect for the Roman Empire. That was good, and there were a couple people that knew their Greek and Roman mythology really, really well, which surprised me.
Yeah,
but
because you go to Greek or Rome, or
right.
Greek or Italy, or in Rome, and people probably don't know that stuff. Right.
Well, and it was great because there too there were a lot of commonalities because Roman Republican art is all about respect for the ancestors, and so there was immediately they probably understood that better than I did as well. Yeah, it was only when I got into the Christianity that you could just see their eyes kind of glaze over. It was very difficult for them.
Right.
Some people liked it, and that's why everybody likes a good story.
Sure.
So, approaching things by a storytelling about, Abraham finally gets this bouncy baby boy, and then God asks him to murder him. You could just hear the whole class go, oh, no. Right? One child, and you want to murder him?
Yeah.
But
you should have played the Dylan song, Highway 61 Revisited. Isn't that the first line of the song? God said to Abraham, kill me, son.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
God said, Abe, you must be putting me on. Like that. Just play that song. There's the story.
There you go. Well, I think it's also a generational problem. Because if you mention things with pop culture, and as my contemporary pop culture is only what I have picked up from recent conversation from my children.
Right.
So I can identify Taylor Swift and Beyonce, and that's about it. Whereas, actually, my Chinese students are much more conversant than I am. So we've sort of just generally agreed that there's going to be this huge generation gap. When you first get up there that first couple days, you're nervous, right? It doesn't matter how many years you've been teaching. You're nervous, and how how are these students going to react to my teaching, that sort of thing. So I don't know about you, but I tend to speak more quickly.
Yeah.
And start using big words. Well, in academia, they'd be just normal words. But
Yeah.
what was really helpful for me is I had this one student sat in the first row, and she kind of drove me crazy because during my breaks, she would always have a long list of English words that she didn't know.
Oh.
And I would have to explain them, like brittle, B-R-I-T-T-L-E.
Right.
And, some words that I thought were pretty simple, but then I realized, talking to Hung Tai, who English is his second language, I mean, he is very, very aware of it, that this is not a word someone learning the English language is going to use very often. Right. So I tried to be more and more aware of that and write more words down.
Right. Yeah.
As well.
Like I had, at one point I talked about the labor union, the Wobbles, and a girl came up to me the next day and said something along the lines like, I looked up this word and it means like you're having difficulty like standing up and like you're swaying back and forth. What does that have to do with labor unionism? It's like, oh yeah, I didn't really explain that very well, did I? And it makes perfect sense. Like, or even like I showed the pop culture class a bunch of Mae West clips.
Oh,
which is all like sort of double entendres.
Yeah.
And a few people came up to me at the end when I said, "Come tell me what I did wrong," and they said, "Like that doesn't make any sense. Like that didn't make any sense. Like even with subtitles, if you would put subtitles on it, it wouldn't have made any sense because double entendres. Like
yeah, I think about the most famous one is that a pistol in your pocket.
Yeah, exactly. And like, I mean, I speak French okay, but whenever I go to Just for Laughs in Montreal, I never go see the francophone comedians because I don't have a strong enough command of the language
to know this.
To get the joke. Like you really have to know the language. Like you almost have a mastery of the language to get a lot of those sorts of, or really to see like jokes in general.
Right.
So that was something I certainly struggled with, but like you say, I mean, and I certainly was nervous as well at the start. One of the reasons, actually, I didn't try and seek you out before the flight here is, like, I was up in the lounge just, like, petrified of the idea of getting on the plane. Like, it's like, what am I doing? Like, so I was really nervous.
Well, and talk about jumping off the cultural high dive.
Yeah.
I can't think of anything more than Beijing. Oh crap! I got to go teach students in Beijing
for 6 hours. And we should say too. So we shot 6 courses, and each course
2 hours each every day.
2 hours each. So we were teaching 6 hours a day, which I know my teacher friends are going to sort of scoff at that and say, "We do that 10 months a year. Like knock it off."
Yeah.
I mean, but for us wimps, like that's a lot. And like, you get here. We got here Saturday afternoon, Saturday night. Teach Monday morning.
And just standing for 6 hours.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, but I worked really hard. I don't know how successful I was, but I worked really hard to get the students involved, to get them to talk, to get them to describe, to articulate, because otherwise it's, why am I doing this? And to do that, you have to have a really high energy level.
Yeah.
Because you can't just walk up to them and just. So I mean, it was almost like doing The Price is Right and Oprah Winfrey, all combined in one thing. So it was physically really, really exhausting.
Yeah. Well, you had a good idea that I think other people, and not just even in art history, might enjoy, that you have a laser pointer.
Yes.
That you pass around, and when the laser pointer shows up at your chair, you're talking.
Yeah. And I also introduce it. It is not just
right. Yes. Excuse me. Yes, I didn't.
A laser pointer.
I didn't give the proper introduction to it. Yes.
Well, no, because I said it's fun. You can tease the cat. You can take down airplanes, but its true power is the wand of wisdom.
Yeah.
When it is placed in your hand, the power runs up your arm. Well, and the trick is refused to take it back, so they have to keep going, or they can pass it on to somebody. Oh, in the last week of class, I actually had one young man. He didn't want to give it up, and so became kind of this rivalry. And then he finally answered like 3 or 4 questions, and he gave it to his friend. So I asked his friend the question, and his friend was struggling. He grabs it back. He says, "I know the answer to that." So it was really effective tool because it's probably a psychological thing, but they had something in their hand that they could point to,
right?
And there's maybe something, I don't know, comforting about that.
Yeah, I would think so. And
there's an authority to it.
Yeah, and there's like a specific of like, this is exactly what I'm talking about. Right here. So I know, like, even for me, like when you like at a conference, say you ask a question, and then the person answers it, and it's clear that I haven't verbalized it well enough to be clear as to what I mean.
Right. Yeah.
Like to have a laser pointer and say, "This is exactly the thing that I'm talking about."
Right.
That you're not going to be misunderstood, I think is part of it.
There is a danger to the laser pointer, though. The student who, and I've seen academics do this too. They take the laser pointer and they twirl it all over.
Yeah.
Like everybody's getting sick.
Yeah.
Oh, please stop.
Yeah. So this thing over here and then that thing over there.
You're like,
whoa. Yeah.
Stop. But yeah, that I tried that in Guangzhou 3 years ago, and it worked really, really well. And I, if somebody really, really doesn't want to talk, I don't make them. But it gave people permission to talk. You know how students, the really quiet ones, maybe they actually do want to say something, but they feel too shy to do it.
Yeah.
So the laser pointer gives them permission.
Yeah. Or they feel out of place. They're like, I shouldn't.
Yeah. My English isn't good enough. That sort of thing. But that was fun. I keep going back to this, but all those Italian words like chiaroscuro and contrapposto. It was kind of cool because all of the students were equally disadvantaged. Because, there's that hierarchy of, her English is better than mine. And there is a real hierarchy of that here in China. But they all started at the bottom with these Italian.
Right, the new language for everybody. Yeah. So then just, I guess, finally, because our beverages are starting to run dry. So now you've done this in Guangzhou, you've done this in Beijing. I'm just interested in terms of the cities, which I know you really liked Guangzhou.
I did.
As a smaller place, lots of parks, lots of stuff to
it was really small.
13 million people.
Yeah, really small.
I mean, how do you even find a place to eat in a community like that?
I know, very limited.
Actually, one of my favorite things in the trip, so we went to Xi'an, where the Terracotta Warriors are, and our tour guide there said that Xi'an has 8 million people, and the tour guide said that
I think they have one stoplight.
I know.
Or maybe it's just the guy with the drum and the gong.
The one guy, You go now, you go, And she said, I really want to go to Beijing. I got to get out of this small town. It's 8 million people. There's got to be opportunities here. But just in terms of just the scope of the town, the scale of the places, did you notice a major difference culturally, in your everyday life between Guangzhou and Beijing?
And this was something actually a lot of Guangzhouans will point out. In Beijing, people are huge.
Oh, they're bigger.
I mean, they're much bigger.
Like taller?
I mean, how many dudes did you see walking around like 6'2", 250? There's some big guys, right?
Yeah.
In the South, they tend to be shorter.
Okay.
And this is something that people in the South will say. I also found people in Guangzhou were more friendly, and I also found that they spoke better English.
Was that like just a city thing? Is that like cities around the world, like people in New York aren't that? Like you're walking down the street in New York, you're not gonna be like, "Hey, how are you? How you doing?" You're gonna smile at everybody. Like,
right.
Is that just an urban thing versus? I mean, sure, like small town. Like I realize we'll joke about 13 million, but could that just be like a small town, big city difference?
I don't know. I just found there were little shopkeepers and people that at the vegetable market that you couldn't have a conversation with, but you spent enough time going in and out of their shop that they would always say hi. They knew what you wanted.
Right.
They could anticipate that. Man, that dude at the 7-Eleven, he was never going to be nice.
Same guy every day. Never,
Right.
I mean, if he recognized me, he never
Oh, no.
visibly
no.
displayed it.
No, they just kept stocking up on more cheap white wine for me.
Yes.
You know, and I left them with a huge inventory.
Yeah, they're hosed now. They're going to have that wine for a year.
Till the next time I come back.
Show up,
right?
Yeah.
No, you want to hear a funny joke about, and I heard this in Guangzhou,
Okay.
the difference between Guangzhou, Beijing, and Shanghai.
Okay.
So, and apparently this is quite a well-known joke. So if an alien landed in Shanghai, people in Shanghai would want to do business with it. If an alien landed in Beijing, they'd report it to the party. Uh-huh. But if an alien landed in Guangzhou, they'd cook it up and eat it. And I must admit, the food was, is really, really great there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they're known for their cuisine.
Right. Right.
But, yeah, Beijing is a challenging city. Challenging in terms of walkability, heat. Guangzhou is it's much more comfortable.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Like the walkability thing is.
Yeah.
I didn't realize it. Like you look on a map and you're like, oh, that's only 3 blocks away. But like the 3 blocks is like 3 miles.
Yeah.
Like it's really far.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's certainly not a walkability. Hung Tai, who we've mentioned a couple times, who's a professor at Pomona College.
Right.
He has likened it to Los Angeles in that respect.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
See, and I think Guangzhou is much more like New York City. Pocket parks and neighborhoods.
Right.
And so that's yeah. I think don't get me wrong. I lived in Beijing for 10 weeks. That does not make me an expert.
No.
Because most of the time I was lying on the sofa with a cold compress on my forehead and putting up my feet, sipping a cooling drink. But it doesn't make me an expert. But that was just a sense that I got.
Yeah. It certainly was. I mean, I walked to the Olympic Park one day, and I mean that's probably as much as you could walk. And when you look on the map of Beijing, it's not far in terms of how big of a city this is. It's a really, really big place.
Yeah. And by the way, thank you for taking that picture of the building that looks like Donald Trump's hair.
Yes, it's a very interesting architectural building. I'll post it with this podcast.
Oh, please do that, because
up on the site.
It's the Donald Trump hair tower.
It was really fascinating. And I got it from I think a good angle too.
You did. It was really
good.
The only thing I regret is that there wasn't an orange neon light shining on it. But it's maybe the future for Donald and his hair.
It could be, yeah. Building for him. I mean, even if he doesn't win in November, he will be forever memorialized on his building in Beijing that doesn't have his name on it. Like it's one of those.
I know. Well, the other fun thing, it's actually students. If we have a minute, but
a minute.
Yeah, where are we going to go?
Where are we going? 3 hours. Where are we going?
Students do. At first, they kind of were surprised that I would make sarcastic remarks about the American political scene.
Yeah.
And then I kept doing it. We would talk about hierarchic scale, that the most important person is always in the center. And I said, you'll never see President Obama in a photo op off to the side. He's always going to be in the center. But they really like the one about, we were talking about colonialism and imperial shopping. So, for example, when the Germans decided they wanted the altar to Zeus from Pergamum, and the reason why you can't see it in Turkey is because it was picked up and brought to Berlin.
Wow.
And the Elgin marbles, for example, were taken from Greece, and now are on display in the British Museum, and the Greeks want them back.
Uh-huh.
And I said, well, the Americans, we were a little slow on the imperial shopping trip. I said, but be very nervous, because Donald, he wants a big wall. And you got a great one.
You got a great wall. It's the best wall.
It's the best wall.
It's the best wall, yeah. They certainly, I talk about Reagan in the American history class, and I show one of his ads, a Reagan TV commercial.
Yeah.
And when the slogan comes up at the end that says, "Let's make America great again," they all sort of perk up. It's like, I've heard that before. Well, that sounds really familiar.
And in light of your problem with plagiarism.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah. We've had a couple plagiarism issues here, which I don't think is any more than anywhere else. But yeah, it's been It's been a thing. So
as long as 93% wasn't.
Yeah, every eighth word. That was my favorite one. Every eighth word. Every eighth word is different. Oh, geez. But yeah, so it has been a really fun summer, and in addition to, I mean, it's been challenging. Certainly, I think it was harder than I thought it was going to be in terms of just the volume of classes. I did the math for me. The 6 classes worked out to 108 individual sessions that I did.
Wow.
You had 120 because my UIBE class was only 8 sessions instead of 20. Right. So you had 120 that you did. I had 108 over the course of really 9 weeks because there was a week off in the middle. So
and I think about how many students we taught.
I know. I think I told you this, but we had there was the farewell party on Thursday. This is Saturday as we're recording, and we had a farewell party on Thursday night. And I had a student come up who I was told after was from the 4-week session, which was in June, who came up, and I recognized the person, but I had no idea what her name was, what class she took, or anything, because this is the volume of classes, the amount of people you're seeing every day. It was and there's very little interaction.
Right.
Like a lot of the students that I had, and I think this was sort of universal in the program, if they had questions, they would go to the TA.
Yes.
So they didn't really deal with us that much. So when you don't have that much interaction with them, I found it very hard to learn.
Yeah, sometimes I really dread what those TAs told them.
It was an interesting experience in that respect. But overall, a great experience.
Oh yeah,
it was.
It's life changing. I mean, you're never when you hear China on the news, which it's surprising how rare you hear the word China on CNN or CBC or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. Given how important this country is.
Yeah, and we're worried about Taylor Swift's feud with what's his name, Kanye. Yeah, I mean that's really important. And the South China Seas, I'm sure the Donald just thinks that's a golf course, but it's shocking. Yeah, and it's also how involved China is with the world. Mm-hmm. They just lost 2 soldiers in the UN peacekeeping, which was a shock to the Chinese. Right. We would never hear about that.
No. I think we think of it as a very insular place.
It's not at all.
Clearly it's not. Yeah.
No, and that was what was cool about being on the campus.
Yeah.
I mean, they had people from all over. It was the Lebanese students, man. They'd sit right under my window, drinking coffee, smoking cigarettes, and talking and laughing till like 12 o'clock at night. But they were having a good time, so I didn't really care. It's really surprising.
I'm glad they looked me up. I'm glad I did it.
Yep.
It's been a tremendous experience. We'll see if they invite me back.
They will.
We'll see. It's always up to the other people. When students ask, like, would you come back again? And then my answer has been, it's not up to me. No. It's up to them. So.
Well, okay. If it's a perfect world, and would you like?
I would do it again. Absolutely. Yeah. I would absolutely do it again.
Well, and I must admit, having you and Hong Tai there, that made it much easier.
It was good that we had sort of a threesome that was here the whole time.
Right.
There were certainly terrific people in the 4-week and some really cool people in the 5-week who we could hang out with, but we were the 3 who were here the whole time, along with Tacos, but he didn't really come out that much.
Yeah,
he's a little more of an insular guy.
Well, and I think his health is not...
Yeah. He struggled moving around.
How he did this.
Yeah. Well, how any of us did this.
I know, but he's old. He's physically weak.
Right.
And how he did this, I have no idea.
Yeah, so it was good, but it was good that we had sort of the 3 of us here the whole time, and we got along with each other, that we could go out to dinner and...
Well, and I think it was... Hung has done this, 4 years?
At least, yeah.
And he really helped me understand, hey, chill, it's summer school, and also explained, these big, huge state schools that these students are going to in the United States, that they're not, this is... You mean you want me to talk?
Right.
They're one student in a 800 class. Of course they don't, Yeah. So that was really helpful to have him there as well.
Yeah, to learn from people who've done this before. And Hung's advice to me was always, this is your first time, do it right the first time. and if you come back, it'll be a lot easier. And I think he's right. I certainly think I made mistakes along the way, but you're going to make mistakes the first time you do anything. So, but I think if I do it again, it'll get easier. And certainly the 5-week session was easier than the 4-week. Come back, do it again. So we should also thank our hosts at the University of International Business and Economics.
Yes.
Fei Wu, the overall coordinator. I don't know exactly what her full title is.
She who must be revered and obeyed.
Yeah, Fei Wu was tremendous. Her whole staff, Soon, Chandler, Nemo, Lynn, the whole crew there, all the TAs were tremendous, and I had a great time and appreciate the one thing actually. They're all very good hosts, but I wanted to take my 2 TAs out for lunch, and they said no. They said we'll go for lunch, but you're not paying. And when we were at the restaurant, I don't know what they said to the waitress, but I had 200 yuan out. The bill was like 180 or something.
Right.
And I had 200 yuan out. They said something to the waitress, and I was like, had my arm extended trying to give her the money, and she did not acknowledge my existence or that I had money in my hand because of what they told her. I have no idea what they said, but they absolutely refused to let me pay.
You've heard of the Chinese refusal, haven't you?
Was that what that was?
Where you go back and forth and back and forth. No, I'm going to pay. No, you're going to pay.
Right, yeah. And it turned into like I just wanted to say thank you. And
sure.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So, but yeah, overall it's a great time. So our drinks are dry. We're going to hit the bar again.
Yeah, so, we're getting dry here.
Yeah, so Dorothy Verkerk, University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Thank you so much for doing this.
You're most welcome.
If you have any questions or comments for the podcast, historyslam@gmail.com. Twitter is at Dr. Shawnee Fever. And if you're out and you see Enrico Palazzo, please say hi for me.
Thanks for listening to the History Slam podcast. Be sure to check out Active History for more features, articles, and be sure to subscribe on iTunes.